Did Baylor lose to BYU, or did BYU beat Baylor on Saturday? This is Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Wednesday, everybody. Welcome to Locked On Baylor. I'm Drake Toll of Sports Illustrated's Inside the Bears, alongside Jarom Jordan of BYU Sports Nation. Thank you for making Locked On Baylor your first listen every single day, whether you're a BYU fan joining us or a Baylor fan. Everybody enjoyed the game on Saturday, at least the late game jitters, 1 o'clock in the morning, just quintessential hard-nosed football. Obviously, Baylor fans didn't like the outcome. Jarom, to start it off, this is a game where you and I, even talking off air, feels like at a neutral site. Baylor probably still has a leg up on BYU. The atmosphere gets to Baylor, but even before we get to how BYU won this game, what did you see out of the Baylor Bears that you really had confidence in? And then even those areas that you thought, geez, this Baylor team's just not ready to compete even for a Big 12 title this season.
I think Baylor is ready to compete for a Big 12 title despite the loss. Obviously, I'm going to come at it from the BYU standpoint. But first off, shout out to my Seattle Seahawks, big win Monday night. Getting it done. Can't wait to get the 12th pick, go 6-11, and draft the third quarterback in the first round. Yeah. It's going to be a weird year. But anyway, this was a heavyweight fight, Drake, that was so fun to watch. And this was a preview of what BYU is going to go through against top competition in the Big 12. Obviously, BYU had a year to let that loss stew. That was the only game in which BYU got pushed around. Yeah. Baylor ran for 303. Obviously, a lot of weapons from Baylor were gone from last year that got drafted or went to the league. Notably, the top two running backs, right, and receivers, and Jalen Petrie safe. Like, there were some ballers that weren't there for Baylor. So it felt like, hey, BYU's got a chance of this because BYU lost basically 3 players on offense and returned everyone else on the whole team. Like, this is, I think, the most experienced BYU team in history because of the COVID extra year. Yeah. And they were hungry and they were annoyed, and that's not a good situation for any team to come into Provo with, because BYU owns the late night window on ESPN. It's got a contract with ESPN. BYU fans are used to the 8:20 kick. BYU players are used to playing in that environment. And now for the back-to-back years, the either eventual or actual champ of a Power 5 conference loses to BYU. It was Utah last year. It was Baylor this year. And those are huge games that BYU certainly got up for. And man, the BYU student section, the Roar of the Cougars, woo, they brought it. It was tough. But I'm really impressed by Baylor. I think Baylor's tremendous. Heavily rooting for Baylor to win the Big 12 now because obviously fans, I feel like-mindedness in a lot of ways with Baylor. Obviously, we like Jeff Grimes and Eric Mateos. And Dave Aranda just seems like an upstanding individual. The university seems awesome. So there's a connection there. People were like, last week, Drake, everyone was like, is this a rivalry? I'm like, no, I don't like my rivals. Yeah. Like, I am annoyed by them. I have no reason to be annoyed at Baylor right now. Like, as a generic fan, let alone media member, it's like, no, it's not a rivalry. It's like really friendly competition where it's like you tip the hat, you hug it out, and then you're gone. I really like Drake after the final play ended. There were a bunch of BYU players, especially on offense, that went and found Jeff Grimes and gave him a hug. Yeah. Like someone said on Twitter, easy to do after a win. And I said, no, it's easy to do when you have a relationship, regardless of outcome. So it was more than football. It was a great game, well played by both, two very good teams. And hey, I'm excited about the future with these two.
Yeah, the altercation, if you will, as
I heard that.
Yeah, I like some Twitter account with like 200 followers just posted altercation, and I accidentally stumbled upon it. Was like, what? It's genius. It's the only one that I've liked so far. So it's the idea. It's the single most cordial rivalry of all time. Like the rivals that love each other, which is this weird, just a new concept of college athletics, really. Yes. But both fan bases and teams have more to play for. There's the religious aspect. There's this wholesomeness from both programs where it's this a culture you don't get in today's age in college athletics. The NIL is not a big deal for either team. The transfer portal, not a big deal for either team. It is just old school football with the bigger meaning, and it brings both fan bases and both teams together. Saturday, though, obviously BYU had more juice in the tank. It felt like late in the game, and I know the atmosphere is a big part of that, how they were able to pull it off and just have more ready to go down the stretch, but also that BYU defense. Jarom, was the secondary coming into this game were you expecting that from BYU? Not just even the secondary, the defensive line shutting Blake Shapen down. He ran the ball 4 times. Those were all 4 logged as sacks. And then the secondary was all over every receiver. Was that kind of the script you were expecting from this BYU defense?
Okay, the secondary we were very excited about because BYU's got some dudes in there. And, D'Angelo Mandel, they feel like has an NFL possibility in the future. Caleb Hayes, only, last year, 18 throws went at him of 20 plus. Only 1 was completed. They brought in Gabe Judy-Lally from Vanderbilt, who is one of the top cover corners in the SEC. You think Vanderbilt in football, maybe you don't think about success, but Gabe adds to this group. Hey, no 20-yard completions from Vanderbilt. Like, what? I think a lot of this had to do with the front 7. Now, BYU is a linebacker school. Like, Fred Warner might be the best backer in the NFL, BYU guy. Like, we've had a rich history here of really good backers. Those 4 dudes, Max Tooley playing like a man possessed, probably got away with the targeting, by the way, on one of those.
Yeah.
But Dylan Doyle did not. That was a play where errant throw, kind of Lopini Katoa lifts his head up, and then Dylan Doyle's right there, and it was like Doyle not being in the game down the stretch was a big deal. When he got thrown out, I thought, oh, the door opens a little bit here with one of the best players for Baylor. And I was like, hey, no rushing, receiving touchdowns today.
Yeah.
Which was crazy last year. But the front for BYU surprised me. The defensive line is there's one dude that fans sort of rally around, Tyler Batty. He got knocked out of the game with he got hit in the hip, and he wasn't even dressed the second half. It's a bunch of kind of these unsung no-namers. I know their name, but the average fan maybe doesn't. That really stuffed the run, plugged holes, and played great defense. Like, I was a little surprised by how well they played. And 289 yards and 20 points in double OT. That is an unbelievable number against, I would say, even a lot of G5s, let alone the Big 12 champs. Like, that was a surprise. They've got pressure. They stopped the run to the tune of 2.9 yards per rush, 3.6 per play. I mean, this was trench warfare, and BYU came out on top on a couple of plays. One at the end of the half, and then a trick play, throwback. That was kind of the difference there, right?
Wouldn't you know, the conversation all week about Puka Nacua and Gunnar Romney being out of the game and whether or not Baylor would get an edge. And then within the first, really opening quarter or so, the starting running back for Baylor and maybe your best receiver, Monterey Baldwin, Tay McWilliams, Monterey both go out of the game. And it's like, all right, well, the playing field's even now. Nobody's got an excuse. And felt like Blake Shapen just didn't meet that moment with those 2 guys out. Even as a quarterback who has a facility record at AT&T Stadium, won a Big 12 championship last year, was so good in relief of Gary Bohannon. You've now seen those guys back-to-back weeks. What did you see out of Shapen on Saturday? To us, it looked a lot like deer in headlights, really the whole game.
Yeah, first true road test, and that's something we felt strongly that BYU could take advantage of. I know he played, at Kansas State, I think was the one true
that's
road
it, pretty
game.
much, yeah.
And even then, what's that, compared to what you had Saturday. Blake's going to be a baller. He seems like he's going to be a really good quarterback. But now BYU is just trying to beat every quarterback that played at Baylor or whatever.
Charlie Brewer.
Charlie
Brewer later in the season.
Broke his hand, so we hope we still see him. But Charlie Brewer is one of our favorite players of all time. Did you know this? Because he's the guy that helped end the streak with Utah last year. We had
that's right.
9 in a row.
That's right.
And we're like, I said on our show, I said, let's send Charlie Brewer a gift basket, dude. He's the guy that helped.
That's what defensive backs used to send limos to Blake Bortles' hotels to make sure he got to the game okay. Same deal with Charlie Brewer. Guys are like gift baskets.
Do it. Shapen's going to be a baller, but BYU dialed up the pressure. Honestly, there have been games against Keaton Slovis as a freshman, USC 2019, that BYU wins. That's a sophomore Zach Wilson in that game. And in OT as well, where BYU drops 8 and plays zone and just makes them pick them apart. Jordan Love at Utah State, BYU picked him off 3 times. Drop 8 zone. I expected that with Shapen, but this wasn't that. That was BYU blitzed, I think, 37% of the time from different spots. So they gave him different looks. The run game wasn't working for either team, so it came down to can the quarterbacks win this game. Certainly, BYU had an advantage in that regard with Jaren Hall having gone through the fire last year as the primary starter. And Jaren Hall's now 7-1 against P5s. Like, when you're not a P5 like BYU yet, playing P5s is a thing. Like, it's like, okay, this is a P5 game. And when you're playing a ranked team, when you're playing a team in the top 10, when you're playing a team that beat you last year, all the focus, all the attention, all the offseason, we're thinking about that home opener is massive. So for Blake to walk into that space where, yes, he had been awesome in the Big 12 title game, but then, gets hurt and doesn't play much or at all in the Sugar Bowl, right?
Yeah.
This was the second biggest game of his life, and it's tough. He's going to be really good, I think. But Jaren Hall certainly rose to the occasion, and BYU overcame 2 missed field goals in OT that would have won the game. Baylor was like, please win this in OT.
Yeah.
We don't want to go down to near the BYU student section. And then in the second OT, it's like, all right, if Baylor scores a touchdown and gets a 2-point conversion, this thing's over. False start. It was like, wow. That was a crazy one. Either team could have won that game and multiple times. It was wild.
Yeah. I tweeted too, there's a God who loves Baptist and LDS equally. Nobody's going to win tonight, baby.
He loves us all, man.
It's just pushing field goals left and right over and over. In totality, I said it to somebody, and I've tried to backtrack, but I can't. It's the craziest ending I've ever seen in person, just because how often do you get very easy field goal, easy for these guys? Like, you're like, all right, sweet. See you guys later. Like, I'm packing my stuff up in the press box twice, and the game wouldn't end. But Jarom, one of the big questions for me coming into this one, and I think I've learned the answer. I want to get your thoughts on BYU being bigger, faster, and stronger this season compared to when they played in Waco last season. But first, I got to tell the folks at home about betonline.net. Betonline.net is where the game starts. If you want to go put your life savings, your mortgage, whatever, on Baylor football to beat BYU like some people did, you can lose all the money that you'd enjoy losing at betonline.net. But let's say that you don't want to lose any money and you want to make safe, smart wagering, you can also use betonline.net. They've got great podcasts. They've got impeccable places to see lines for every game every week. Baylor's favored by 31 points, over under 54 against Texas State. Check all that out at BetOnline Podcasts as well. MLB still going on, NFL, everything you can imagine when it comes to sports wagering and sports entertainment at betonline.net. Check them out. It is where the game starts. Jarom, Kalani Sitake hammered it home after that Baylor game last year. Baylor was just that much more physical than BYU, and they beat those guys around. And Saturday from jump, you could tell the BYU guys were juiced, and they just played a different brand of physical football that we didn't see in Waco last year. Did this team just get up for a game, or are they already bigger, faster, stronger, more equipped than they were last season?
I think it's both. BYU feels like its left tackle, Blake Freeland, is a potential first-round guy. He got that kind of buzz in the offseason. The left guard, Clark Barrington, has been projected as an NFL draft pick. The right tackle, Kingsley Suamati, is a 5-star transfer from Oregon. In a year, he's projected to potentially be an NFL draft pick. And then they have 1 or 2 on the bench they really like. So there could be 3 or 4 guys that played in this game just on the O-line, let alone Jaren Hall, and BYU feels like Puka Nacua is an NFL-type guy. And then with the linebackers, BYU feels like there's a few NFL guys as well. But the BYU run, the line, I think obviously both lines struggled to establish the run. But late in that game, it felt like BYU was getting a little more of what it needed. Getting down to the goal line, executing, getting Lopini Katoa in the end zone. A trick play is what you got to do to loosen it up if you need it, right? Chase Roberts throws it back to Jaren Hall, 22 yards for a touchdown. They were up for it, but they're also very improved. This BYU line and Baylor, PFF said 2 of the top 10 in the country. And that was I've never wanted to watch O-line play more than this year. Obviously because BYU's got a good one, but Arkansas is on the schedule. They're good. Notre Dame was listed there. How about Notre Dame? That feels like a game that, hey, BYU can go win in Vegas, perhaps. Let's see. At Oregon this week for BYU, so it doesn't stop. And then Arkansas coming to Provo later in the year. Arkansas is in that spot on the schedule where Baylor was, where Jaren Hall was injured in the game last year, had broken ribs, played that game, couldn't quite be himself. That 4th and 1 run, he runs for like 50. He's chucking it up to Puka, yes, but it wasn't the same. This is a healthy BYU at home. It was very different this year. And obviously Baylor was figuring out, who are we? We're coming off this 3-7 year, I think, in 2020, and like, hey, no, we're good, and eventually Big 12 champs. So yeah, different situations this year, but BYU certainly was up for it, and it reminded a lot of us of 83 and 84. Steve Young opens his senior year with the loss at Baylor, which was very disappointing for him. We've talked to him about it a bunch of times. He's like, I hate talking about that loss at Baylor, because they win the next 11 and finish 7th in the country. And he is second in the Heisman, and he's the number 1 pick in either draft. He chooses USFL. He would have gone number 1 to the Bengals, by the way. That he was told, I would have gone number 1. And then in 84, he was a similar group, but they lost Young, lost Gordon Hudson, consensus All-American tight end. BYU blows out Baylor at home. So it was like, is this 83-84 where home teams win and BYU gets revenge? And it was like, it ended up being that way. So some BYU fans have joked, we don't want to oversay this, but every year BYU's defeated Baylor at home, BYU won the national title. BYU's not playing for a national title this year, okay? I still think BYU is going to go like 10-2 regular season.
Yeah.
But it's very exciting.
Well, Jarom, I don't know if you can see. I'm going to break the fourth wall. Up here, there's that little sign. Right there. It says Valonia. It's a town in Arkansas. Grew up a Razorback fan. So I've already called my bosses at Sports Illustrated, like, look, what are the odds we can pull some strings? And they send the Baylor beat writer back to Provo. I'm already missing Cougar Tales. So I'm having I left my heart in Provo. I'm having BYU withdrawals at this point. But I've gotten the point across over and over to myself that BYU is a really good football team and Baylor just lost to a good football team. There are a lot of Baylor fans, also transparently myself, that are struggling with that idea. Anytime you lose a game, you've seen it too, where I'm sure BYU loses a game and it's like, well, there it goes. There it is. What if we just suck now? And it's not the case, obviously, for Baylor. You've convinced me with Division I, or, obviously Division I, but NFL talent on the offensive line. And as good as Jaren Hall was, the defense playing to their skill too, that BYU is a formidable opponent that you lose on the road. And to me, playing even more into that atmosphere, I said death sentence, and it really is. How do you walk into Lavell Edwards Stadium like it was on Saturday and win a football game no matter who you are? And I think my first question for anybody at Baylor would be, is it like that every Saturday? Was this some kind of rarity, or is this just BYU day in, day out?
It was certainly special. I wouldn't say every Saturday was that, but it's closer than you'd think to that. Having a top 10 team come in, a P5 champ, a team that BYU lost to last year, the home opener, the last year of independence, the excitement around the Big 12, having Brett Yormark in town, a year almost to the day, within 1 day of when BYU got – it was actually a year from the invite to the Big 12. And last year, BYU had a similar vibe against Utah, where it was trying to snap the 9-game losing streak and rush the field, and it's crazy. Yeah, there was – I mean, it's similar to that every week, but it's not that crazy every seat. So, I mean, when you're playing, Utah State on a Thursday night, you're just not going to have like every seat filled, but hopefully you do for Utah State. And BYU fans are awesome. And you saw that last night. I expect, and especially when BYU's real good, listen, they're there. And this is the thing where it's like, can BYU beat Oregon and now you're in the playoff combo? Like, again, I don't believe BYU's going to the playoff. I would love a New Year's Six at some point for BYU, or expanded playoff. It's so hard to have just one loss or zero. Like, well, BYU did in 84. BYU didn't play anybody in 84. Like, they played third-ranked Pitt. They end up 3-7-1. You need some of the good teams to stink. Maybe Notre Dame is a 8-4 team, and it's more winnable as opposed to like a 10-2 Notre Dame or whatever. But it's a fun atmosphere, man. BYU fans are fantastic. They get up, and not an ounce of liquor, and still all that energy, right?
Wild. Unbelievable. And also a rustic complex, too. It's almost as if, and I know a lot of the BYU administration talked about how going to McLean Stadium and being in Waco really helped give an idea of what they want Lavell Edwards to look like as they continue forward with these new upgrades. So you got a taste of, I'm walking through the concourse thinking like, wow, this is like back in time football, and you walk out on the field.
1982.
It just screams it. It's all concrete. The bathrooms, like no dividers between the urinals. You're just like, oh, okay, this is
it's like a horse trough.
Yeah, this is not 2022 anymore. And then you go into the press box or the facilities, and they're first class with the mountains in the background too. Just felt like everything that you
hard
could
to beat
think
the
of.
view.
Oh, So even with the Idaho wildfires that were pumping smoke all over the state of Utah, and however funky that was, you still got just a quintessential college football, especially early season college football too. It doesn't get much better than that. And atmosphere, all things put together. You mentioned though, neutral site. If these two teams played, I mean, those 14 penalties, 5 false starts. You don't false start 5 times as you're at home. That just doesn't happen. That was indicative of BYU's noise. Blake Shapen's told folks after the game, I just couldn't hear. I couldn't hear anything. And you box in a young quarterback like that, things don't go your way, and you lose a game still in double overtime. At a neutral site, what gives you confidence this game is even closer or even goes the other way?
Can it be closer? I mean, that was like as close as it possibly could have been, right? It was basically one play. BYU scored a touchdown, double OT or not. I mean, in regulation, BYU's about to win that. Yeah, miss field goal. And so who knows on a neutral field, but you'd think that really pushed BYU over the edge, and it was a knife's edge. On a neutral field, maybe Baylor wins this by 3 or 7. I don't know, but the penalties certainly make you think, hey, BYU took advantage of that. And the motivation of being at home and I'm looking forward to, hey, and maybe they do play a neutral site in Arlington in the future. Like that could be a thing, neutral-ish, because it's still in Texas. But a few hours away. So who knows? Next year's not that year for BYU. The Cougars expect to be very good this year and lose some real talent to the NFL. And so it's maybe in 2 years. How about that?
I have a weird feeling that Baylor will be right back in Provo next year. It's probably just my bias that I want them to be back in Provo. But with BYU coming in, and there's no guarantee that your schedule will stay. Hey, keep the rotation. BYU comes to Waco. It just feels like it always works out. You go the same place 2 years in a row when realignment hits in a weird way. And I would love to do it. I hope it's the case. And the atmosphere, all that plugged in. The moment it gets down to BYU drives the field goal set up, and not a chip shot, but you're thinking, all right, let's pack it up, make sure all the trash is empty, and hit the elevator in the press box.
I'd composed my tweet already. Yeah.
Right. You're sitting there in the box as well, like getting ready for what's Sataki going to say post game, and then you get missed field goal. What's going through your mind? What did you say? Is that one of the crazier endings that even you've seen at any game with Lavell Edwards?
Yeah, no, that was up there, because Jake Oldroyd is a kid that is money. I mean, he made BYU's first 50-plus yarder in 2019, and the first time in 13 years. Like, long field goals aren't a thing at BYU. And this dude made like 10 of his first 11 in 2019, and then 2020 he's lights out. It's like, I don't know what happened, but it was crazy. And Jaren Hall, hugging him at the end, that was an image that people saw on ESPN. Extremely emotional. I talked to Jaren yesterday for a segment on BYU TV, and Jaren said, Jake would have done the same for me. And he's going to make a ton of kicks for us to help us this year, which is so true. But yeah, that was crazy. I thought BYU blew it twice. I thought there's no way BYU still wins this game.
Yeah.
And amazingly, they did. They got a stop in double OT.
Somebody said the same thing. They looked at me and said, no, never has the team missed the game-winning field goal and won the game. They set up for the second game-winning field goal like a broken record. And sure enough, find a way to pull it off in the end. Students rushed the field. Kalani Sitake post-game was a treat to listen to. That aside, Kalani Sitake, man, isn't that guy awesome?
He is one of the best people ever. And he is so fun. I mean, sometimes, like, on the coach's show, he's like, monotone, keeping it, and he doesn't want to give it. That's from the school of Kyle Whittingham, because he is a disciple of two people. One is Lavell Edwards, obviously, having played for Lavell, all-timer, one of the greatest coaches ever. And then 2 is Kyle Whittingham, who is a disciple of Lavell as well. You kind of come from that tree, having been the defensive coordinator up at that school up north for about 9 years. So, or 10 years. So he doesn't always give it away, but Kalani is one of the funnest people ever. And he is super likable. He is one of the greatest recruiting assets BYU has, because people want to come play for him. And there are people who go elsewhere, like local guys, get a taste of that life, and then they'll come back and go, I actually want to be home and be by BYU. Kingsley Suamatia from Oregon is one of those. Puka Nacua is one of those. And there are guys that come and influence the program. Samson Nacua from Utah last year helped And so, yeah, it's an amazing atmosphere. He's the first Tongan head coach in FBS ever. He's one of only 2 Polynesians. Both happen to be members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Ken Niumatalolo at Navy as well. So it's wild, man. We live in a day where BYU, and especially given what happened a couple of weeks ago with Duke, is BYU's got a Tongan head coach and it's got a black quarterback. Yeah. And it's a new amazing BYU that is doing great things and loving and learning and trying to reach out in that way.
Well, I think we've encapsulated all that there is with both BYU and Baylor for this weekend, especially. Moving forward, though, Jarom, to leave things off, from what you've seen out of Baylor, Dave Aranda, Jeff Grimes, Eric Mateos, the offensive, defensive lines, Siaki Ika, who you guys are super familiar with, is it a team, in your opinion, that you still think has a shot at the Big 12 title?
Yes, it will depend on Blake Shapen, obviously, and figuring out who are our running backs. Like, are they going to, from a Baylor perspective, can we get this done? Tyquan Thornton's not there. Who are we throwing it up to, right? Who's going to make a play here? Is staying healthy and getting him in position to win. Jeff Grimes, good play caller. Like, that defense is tough. Like, that was a very good BYU offensive line, and it was hard yards. And it took a fifth-year senior quarterback in Jaren Hall, who has been waiting 3 years to be the guy and played 7 Power 5s, won 6 of those last year, to be at home to win that game. And now BYU flies up the charts. That's the respect of Baylor, of beating Baylor, is BYU goes from 21 to 12. Baylor's still right there. Like, Oklahoma State's doing their thing. They're always like good to very good. Are they ever really great? It's interesting to see, are they going to make that jump, or is it going to be the new Pac-12 where everyone eats their own? Oklahoma certainly is a very good team. Dylan Gabriel's interesting because he's a good quarterback. Is he a great quarterback? Is he as good as the others? Like, a lot of pressure there. I like Baylor's chances. I really do. And maybe you have 2 teams that have 2 losses in league in the title game. Like, I don't think anyone goes unscathed. 1 loss feels like that'd be pretty hard to go through. And looking at all the numbers, because we do a Big 12 plus 4 power ranking every Monday. We call it the completely unbiased version.
Yeah.
We feel like there are so many teams in the top 40 where it's like, no game's easy. Ask West Virginia.
Yeah.
Just somehow lost by 13 in OT to Kansas because of a pick 6. That was a crazy finish, by the way. I was like, how do you win by more than 1 score in OT? It's because you pick 6 or you stupid score. That was wild.
And the swagger for Kansas to take that ball back, all put together. Just what a weekend in general. That was
when
that
your
was
name's
it.
Kobe Bryant, you do that.
Yeah. Kansas wins on the road. Notre Dame, Texas A&M, all of it put together. Baylor, BYU was just the icing on that cake to end the evening.
The whole country was watching too. How about that?
Did you see the most views of a night game since 2016? I think.
Yeah, 2.4 mil, and this is BYU's spot in ESPN's programming, and they will stay that way in the Big 12, by the way. Like, that is that 9:20 Central kick, that is BYU's spot. They will almost always have that. Now, in 2019, BYU had a couple afternoon games against USC and Washington where BYU was very interesting, and they wanted that kind of, hey, bring in the Skycam, bring in the ABC ESPN split. But the 9:20 Central time is BYU's bread and butter with ESPN.
It is Big 12 after dark, much more entertaining than Arizona State and Stanford. Thankfully, we've got the Big 12 after dark now with BYU. Jarom, for all the Baylor fans that are now quasi-BYU fans, I actually added that to my Twitter bio, part-time BYU fan. For at least
That's hilarious.
For all of those out there, either Baylor fans or BYU fans that want to find more of your work, where can they go? Where can they find your stuff?
Yeah, check out BYU TV. We're excited to have Baylor featured in all kinds of sports, in the future with women's soccer, women's volleyball, baseball, softball, and so on, gymnastics. Of course, men and women's basketball. BYU TV, BYU Sports Nation is our daily show Monday through Friday on BYU TV and BYU Radio on demand as well. So, yeah, check it out. We couldn't be more excited to be in the Big 12 next year. It's going to be so much fun.
Well, to everybody out there, thanks for making Locked On Baylor your first listen every single day, especially with Jarom on today. A great insight on Baylor and BYU. Come back tomorrow. We're not talking about Texas State yet because nobody really cares yet. It's all about Baylor and BYU all this week and trying to break it down the rest of the way. We'll get to Texas State like 5 minutes before kickoff. Hopefully the team's not overlooking them as much as Locked On Baylor is. But this has been, as it always will be, come back tomorrow, Locked On Baylor.